Welcome back everyone, I'm Matt from MediaMatt, and today we'll be tackling Jaws 2. Jaws 1 was a pretty successful movie. It was a box office hit, it was successful, people loved it, it should have ended there. But it didn't. I personally thought the original Jaws ended on a satisfying note, which makes it all the more hard to bear that we got not one, not two, but 3 sequels. Jaws as a franchise has never really worked for me conceptually. I mean, sure, as a kid I wanted to see more Jaws films, but as an adult they just don't work for me. In retrospect, you can only go so far with the concept of sharks killing people for 2 hours. Hell, it was even joked about in Back to the Future 2 with Jaws 19.
Shark still looks fake.
So at least Universal Pictures is somewhat self-aware. With all that being said, Jaws 2 just kind of feels unnecessary. I know I'm not alone in saying that, but it does beg the question why there needed to be a sequel to Jaws specifically.
Hello, I like money.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious that this movie was made as a result of the first one being so successful. From a business standpoint, I can understand. It made a lot of money, so a sequel was bound to make a lot of money regardless of the quality. I don't want to be all negative, of course. There are good things in Jaws 2, though they're few and far between. For one, we have Roy Scheider back as Martin Brody, which is nice to see. We'll get back to his character later on, but I do want to say he was good in the role despite all the material he was given. Before I ramble any further, let's go ahead and give Jaws 2 a chance, because after all, that's what reviews are for. So, let's take a look at Jaws 2 and see if seconds are worth coming back for this time around. The movie opens with 2 divers searching the wreckage of the Orca from the first movie. We know nothing about them, and the Jaws theme is subtly playing in the background, so we know exactly where this is going. So right off the bat, I already have a problem with this. Now, the first Jaws didn't exactly portray sharks realistically, but it did at least kill people sparingly and only like one at a time typically, so it was more believable in that sense, right? But right here, it kills 2 divers in quick succession, so it begs the question, is it hungry or is it just killing people for the sake of killing people? I have a feeling this was done intentionally. After all, what is the #1 rule of a sequel? In most cases, it would be to outdo the original, and one of those things is the kill count. Martin Brody is late for the grand opening of a hotel that isn't really important, nor will it ever come up again.
Where the hell have you been?
Looking for a better movie to be in, I'm sure? I know I said earlier this scene doesn't have much purpose, but that's not true. We meet a lot of characters here. Or as I like to call them, walking, talking meat sticks. But hey, at least we have a guest appearance from Napoleon Dynamite himself.
Can you dance?
I'll freaking dance if I feel like it, gosh! I wonder if Red Lobster is still open at this hour. Yummy, 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 yummy. The following scene we meet Deputy Hendricks, played once again by Jeffrey Kramer. He's told there's an abandoned cruiser out on the shore, so he heads out with an old man to investigate. We then regroup with our teens as they're about to go sailing, but not before we get a little more characterization.
I'm thin, I wear glasses, I live in Amity Island year-round. I'm not good enough for her.
Girls only want boyfriends who have great skills.
I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, these characters are just kind of paper thin. They have almost no character outside of, I want girl, I want to go sailing, hey, let's drink beer. I get it, they're teenagers. And in a movie like this, it fits right into the 80s slasher stereotypes. But as a result, there's hardly anyone to root for here, and it doesn't help that they all blend in together. That being said, the actors do seem to have decent on-screen chemistry, so credit where it's due. Back on the beach, a girl is water skiing and is taken out by the shark. It isn't long before the driver is next in line. If I'm gonna go out in style! Seriously though, she just pours gasoline all over herself and then shoots a flare gun, and I'm just sitting here thinking like, I've seen this movie at least a handful of times, right? And to this day, I still cannot decide, was this self-defense or was she trying to demonetize herself? I have no idea. Either way, Brody is called to the scene of an explosion and has a sense of deja vu as he suspects there is another shark. As ridiculous as this is, Brody being paranoid about another shark isn't that far-fetched. It makes sense for his character. And imagine for a second that we didn't see the shark so early on, we actually as an audience can be paranoid ourselves. I know it's Jaws 2 and we're gonna get a shark, obviously, but I really do believe that they could have played off of Brody's paranoia just a bit more in this movie. Hendricks is ordered to keep dragging until they find something related to the accident. And they do find something alright.
It's a power line!
Huh, where have I seen this before? Some characters find a washed up killer whale on the beach with large bites taken out of it. Brody presumes it's a shark, obviously, but has an expert come in for her opinion. She doesn't outright exclude the possibility that it could have been a shark, but the bites aren't conclusive enough.
That another shark could come in.
Sharks don't take things personally, Mr. Brody.
Not if the 4th movie has anything to say about it. Brody goes to Mayor Vaughn, played once again by Murray Hamilton, to inform him that there might be another shark, but of course he dismisses it. Now, I'll try to keep this brief, but let's discuss the mayor for a second. In the original, he was determined to keep the beaches open for business despite the looming threat of a shark, out of fear for the town's economy failing. I know the mayor was seen as sort of a secondary antagonist, which is fair, but I never saw him to be outright evil. I'm sure he wanted the beaches closed, but he knew that would upset the townsfolk, and they would go out of business as a result. He even says himself that he was worried for his own children during the shark attack scene.
My kids were on that beach too.
Even a small character like Vaughn had an arc in the first movie which was realized when he swallowed his pride and signed for Quint to kill the shark. In the sequel, however, he's reduced back to his old ways and doesn't even consider Brody's word. I mean, it happened the first time, sure, but the second time around, shouldn't he at least be somewhat paranoid? Some might even say, like, well, he has to ignore him, otherwise the whole idea of Brody's paranoia wouldn't work. I disagree. Brody's paranoia could have still worked, even with the mayor on his side. It's even hinted at in a later scene, which I'll get to, but the point still stands. Brody killed the shark in the first movie, and for the mayor to be so dismissive is frustrating to me. Of all people to dismiss him, it should not be the mayor. Back at the sheriff's department, Brody is lacing his revolver ammunition with cyanide, which, again, will come into play later on. He then asks if Hendricks can have the camera footage developed the following morning to see if the divers might have captured anything of value. Brody is up in his watchtower, eagerly anticipating the shark's arrival. He then sees a vague silhouette in his binoculars and doesn't take any chances.
It's just bluefish!
Admittedly, this scene is okay. It's an example of the paranoia I was talking about earlier that the filmmakers really could have played into. Back at the office, he receives a call stating that the photos are ready for development. With no time to waste, he rushes over and gets exactly what he needs. He rushes over to City Hall and shows the council members the photographs. But of course, they don't believe him, and as a result, he's fired. Now, for those of you who don't know, there actually was a deleted scene where the council members took a vote for Brody to be dismissed from his chief duties. All but one person raises their hand.
Anyone opposed?
This is confusing. Up until this point, the mayor has shown no signs of supporting Brody. Even when Brody fired his gun on the beach, Vaughn seemed deeply disappointed, scared even. However, in this scene, despite all the knowledge, he doesn't want Brody fired. Now, you could argue that Brody has had a good relationship with the town as chief, so maybe he was reluctant to let him go, and maybe that is the case, but his reluctance to even hear what Brody is saying makes it so contradictory. This is what I was referring to earlier when I said that Vaughn believing Brody about the shark could have worked, because he'd still be up against his peers, and ultimately the votes would cancel out his. Not to mention, it would show that he actually learned since the events of the first film. The following morning, Michael and Sean decide to go sailing, despite their father's wishes not to. I'm just gonna let you guys know, I'm gonna be skipping a lot of the scenes from here on out. They don't add a lot to the plot, and it just boils down to a handful of shark attack scenes, one right after the other. The following scene, Mike and Ellen are out driving when they notice an ambulance is rushing towards the shore. They find out a diver suffered from a bad case of the bends after being spooked by something underwater.
Something must have scared him down there. He just panicked.
So much algae underwater. Never again. Fearing for his kid's life, Brody heads out on a police boat to bring the kids back to shore. It's here where the kids are attacked by the shark. Mike is knocked unconscious and is taken to shore for medical attention, but not before running into his father. He explains that he was sorry for disobeying him, and he assures him that Sean is okay.
You wanted to come. It's okay, wasn't it?
Okay, he feels sorry about Sean being left out there, which I guess makes sense, but I have to ask here, what was stopping Sean from going with his brother? I mean, like, really, he's being left with a bunch of strangers that he hardly even knows, so, like, wouldn't Sean be better off sticking with his brother as, like, kind of like an emotional thing? This scene has just always not made a whole lot of sense to me. I'm like, why wouldn't Sean realistically go with his brother? I guess maybe it's for plot reasons, and maybe it gives more of, like, an emotional reason for Brody to actually go out and pursue the kids. I don't know what the reason is. I've just always found this to kind of be kind of stupid. It's not long after that a Coast Guard arrives with a helicopter to rescue the remaining teens. Coast Guard for lunch. The teens are slowly drifting towards Cable Junction, but thankfully Brody shows up to save them. The shark jump scares Brody and makes him crash into the port. Brody then uses the boat's crane in an attempt to pull the kids towards his direction, but in doing so he pulls up a power line. The shark starts heading in his direction, and right as the shark bites down, it's electrocuted. Which I have to admit is a pretty badass way to kill a shark, but as awesome as it is, it still doesn't beat out the original.
Well, you son of a...
So ends our movie. The shark is dead, Brody and the teens are safe, and... well, I was gonna say that they made it back to the shore, but we don't actually see that happen, so I'm just gonna chuck it up to they all turn into cannibals and eat each other, so that's the end of Jaws 2. After revisiting Jaws 2 again, I'm still very conflicted. Obviously, I don't think this is a horrible movie like some people do. Hell, I wouldn't even put it in my top worst shark movies of all time list. Believe me, I've seen a lot, and I mean a lot of shitty shark movies in my time. And while Jaws 2 may not be a dumpster fire, it's just unnecessary. There are elements in this movie that I do like. For example, Brody's paranoia did actually work, but it doesn't really go anywhere, unfortunately. Beyond Brody, Ellen, Hendrix, and maybe the mayor, a vast majority of the characters were not interesting and felt like cannon fodder. And to be fair, this was set during the era of slashers with high body counts and stereotypes, but even slashers like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street had better, more memorable characters. They weren't exactly well written, but at least they actually had memorable traits. I think it was a big mistake to have the movie focus on the teens for the last half of the movie, as I genuinely think the first half is much more interesting, and entertaining for that matter. It's almost as if they had switched directors and writers between those halves, which I believe they actually did. Overall, Jaws 2 is just okay for me. It's not a great movie, but I will say it's easily the best sequel since the original, which if we're being honest isn't exactly a high bar to set. It's somewhere in the middle for me. If I'm doing a Jaws marathon, I can throw this movie on and be entertained by it, but that's about it. With all that being said, the fun stops at the next installment. But of course, Jaws 3 will have to be for another time. God, I'm not looking forward to that movie. Thank you all for watching. This has been Media Matt, and I will see you guys all next time. Take care.